Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Camille, and I am joined by my team members, Tamanna and Annelise. We are representing the Indonesian Oil Association, and our project is titled Smallholder Empowerment Through Microfinancing and Sustainability Training.
A little more background on smallholders and why we chose to focus on them. They are ultimately a big part of the palm oil industry. They make up over 40% of that industry. And so if we want to move forward with sustainable oil palm production, then we need to include smallholders in that process, which is overall not an easy task, given that smallholders have a lot of variability even within that broad grouping. As our keynote speaker said at the beginning of this challenge, smallholder farms can vary from between 2 and 50 hectares. They can range from shareholders to subsistence farmers to even small enterprises. And so we need to think about sustainability for these farmers. Through our research, we identified a few barriers preventing smallholders from being sustainable, the first being a lack of access to finance. Initiating sustainability is expensive, and many smallholders simply do not have the means to invest in it. The second barrier that we identified was a lack of knowledge of sustainable farming techniques. Even if a farmer were to have the finances, they might not know of the benefits or the importance of sustainable farming. And even if they did know, they might not know the most cost-effective techniques. And additionally, probably the most important part of this barrier is that there's a lack of awareness about the RSPO certification process, which is a really important certificate to open up the palm oil industry to broader markets and ensure sustainable farming practices. This process is usually targeted at big corporations, and thus it ignores smallholders a lot of the time. A third issue is the overall weak climate smart value chain. There's just simply not much of a pre-existing sustainable production process.
As Annelise mentioned, smallholder voices are often lost within the supply chain, and we want to inspire them. We hope to empower smallholders through the process of gaining palm oil certification, as well as increased education about more sustainable farming practices. Farmers are often not aware of various sustainable farming practices because of a lack of governmental resources. In addition, the certification process can reach up to 12% of the annual income of farmers. Our microloans aim to provide financial assistance to aid with this process. Not only is current palm oil production incredibly detrimental to the environment, but a shift to sustainability could lead to greater access to markets in North America and Europe. This could provide enthusiasm for this proposed shift. In combination with microloan sustainability training and a diversification of crops, our plan directly tackles the issue of palm oil cultivation on the environment, as well as smallholder empowerment.
So for the size and scope of this project, we're focusing on Central Kalimantan, which is the region circled on the map on the slide. The reason that we're focusing on this specific region is because in Central Kalimantan, agriculture makes up almost 21% of the region's GDP, which is the largest agricultural share of GDP out of the five provinces. Additionally, out of the 41,000 smallholder farmer households, we aim to reach at least 1,000 households, and we'll do this through the smallholder cooperative members of our organization, the IPOA. So to do this, our plan will start with kind of a preliminary outreach program where ultimately, we want to make sure that we're incorporating the voices of these smallholders. Our program is targeting these smallholders. We want to make sure that they're heard. And so before we even begin implementing the core of our project, we want to first kind of pitch our idea to the smallholder cooperative members, get their feedback, potentially make adjustments about the specifics of our project according to any considerations that they feel are important. And then we want to also work with those members to spread the word and make sure that smallholders are actually aware that our project exists. And then lastly, we also want to partner with the Ministry of Agriculture, specifically to help implement our educational training program.
One of the steps listed to provide resources would be to issue microloans to smallholders that are part of the cooperative of the IPOA. Being a part of the cooperative that is a member of the IPOA already makes them a greater asset. So reducing their potential collateral on the condition of them taking part in training programs to improve farming techniques and ethical labor practices while following up on them would create an incentive for smallholders to take part in this program, while these programs in turn would provide them with the informational resources and incentives to follow through with sustainable farming methods. So the combination of receiving information and training along with having the resources to implement these programs would allow for greater empowerment for the smallholders. Furthermore, funding to create a website for information dissemination regarding microfinancing and sustainable and ethical practices could be referred to as a resource for the smallholders themselves that they could build upon and allow for more local perspectives to be incorporated within the program.
We want to provide training and education needed for more sustainable farming practices consistent with farmer empowerment. This education component of our project is the heart of our idea, as a reliance on external funding can hinder long-term independence. The goal of this education is not only to get farmers excited about the possibility of increased market access with a greater demand for sustainability, but give them the tools they need to fight against problems like deforestation and a loss of biodiversity. Our first plan to empower is to expose certain farming practices as harmful, like slash and burn and the use of pesticides. This will be done through training sessions and information campaigns through membership within the IPOA. Techniques like land sparing reduce the land needed for cultivation for palm oil plants, which directly tackles the issue of production biodiversity trade-off. Other areas not being used to reduce palm oil trees could be set aside for native plants. In that same vein, we hope to introduce crops that instill a sense of native pride for things not directly tied to the export market. Sorghum is an old seed superfood that requires less water and is thus less susceptible to changes in the environment. It can be cooked into porridge, flour, or even popcorn. Oil palm plantations have a commercial lifespan of 25 years, after which the oil palm trees must be replanted. The replanting process requires uprooting trees with heavy equipment and is attributed to further declines of biodiversity. Planting sorghum would not only provide a great source of nutrition to farmers, but also empower them to grow a crop not necessarily tied to the export market like palm oil is. In addition, we will be providing education and loans to help farmers access certification. We will ensure smallholders are guided through paperwork and assessment. In addition to increased market access, they will be empowered through their legal ownership and supply chain certification that accompanies more sustainable farming practices. We will also ensure that national interpretations by the RSPO, which include a minimum wage for workers, is adhered to.
And to ensure that the training programs are being implemented, we would be holding monthly meetings from staff members of the IPOA and with the smallholders cooperatives to ensure that the information that they're being provided with are actually being taken in and implemented. And to go for on-field checkups, there would be staffers, and this would require a greater amount of manpower to check if sustainable practices are being implemented on the field and if ethical labor practices are also being accounted for. And so to kind of give a very rough timeline for this, about the first 2 months of this would be program building and initial outreach to figure out if we are accounting for all the community considerations. And then about 10 months would be going for the implementation of the microfinancing so that they have the financial resources to act upon the training and the information that they're receiving, which would also have the monthly meetings and the staffing check-ins. And the estimated budget overall is around $3.5 million. Considering the time constraints under which we're working, the microfinancing would be for about 1,000 households with $2,500 per loan. And the program building, which is built up of the government salary, would be about 400,000. Database creation would be 50, and accountability measures, which would require the greatest manpower, would be about 500,000. And if this could be something that we build off upon, then microfinancing would be able to create a greater way of refinancing their own project, and it would be able to expand throughout the greater Kalimantan area. Furthermore, if this information spreads, this could allow for smallholders to be greatly incentivized to join the IPOA to make use of the resources that they have available, while also having a stronger bargaining power. That is it. Thank you.
Thank you all, just under time. Good work. I'm going to start the 5-minute period now in which the judges can ask any questions that they have about your presentation.
Could you talk about where, sorry, I didn't write down the total budget figure you had, but where would that money come from? So what would be your source of revenue to kind of fund these operations?
So we are hoping to be working with the Ministry of Agriculture, who would also potentially be working with the Ministry of Finance to be obtaining that financing. Potentially, I think that would involve international cooperation with other countries, but that would be more of the Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Finance focus than for the IPOA.
I like your focus on diversification of crops and local consumption and less environmentally depleting crops. How are you going to address, though, the opportunity cost to smallholders? So, and by that I mean the gap between the revenue that they could earn from an export crop such as palm oil towards a much less lucrative crop. What's going to make up that gap?
Right. Yeah, that is a very good question. And we recognize that palm oil is pretty lucrative, and the incentive for farmers to switch over to a less lucrative crop that maybe isn't as export oriented, but provides something like nutrition, which palm oil is actually not that great nutrition wise. So I think I mentioned in the speech that the lifespan of an oil palm plantation is about 25 years. So we were thinking that it wouldn't necessarily be an opportunity cost as much as an opportunity for the soil to regrow its nutrients and become usable for farming of palm oil plants again.
Additionally, the microloans that we're proposing are kind of aimed towards alleviating some of that short-term opportunity costs. And our hope is that over the long term, it is actually more economically viable.
Thank you.
So could you elaborate more on the information sharing aspect? So when you say you're creating a database, and so most of these farmers, so is that more of a assuming that they have access to internet, etc., or so how can you elaborate further on the information sharing aspect?
Yes, definitely. So internet was something that we found Indonesia to be a little bit more advanced in, but we recognize that not all farmers will have access to a sort of internet-based database. So we were hoping that they could, through word of mouth and also membership in the ICPOA, that they would just be able to spread their own techniques through not only written, but word of mouth, and then the training conferences that we plan to hold every month as just a way to check up on their techniques and sustainability initiatives that we will also be providing training for.
Do you see engagement with any other actors or stakeholders kind of in the industry? So you talk about providing loans, but do you see a role for microfinance institutions or banks kind of in this activity and other actors in the industry?
So we have been looking at trying to include more of the private bank institutions that are very decentralized and involved in these locations. And if we decide, if we're able to expand it for longer than a year, I think those are potential options that we would like to explore, because that would make the financing options and the microfinancing options easier. But if it's just a year, I think trying to do it through the government, like the ministries, would be a more feasible way of getting the financial resources out to these smallholders so they can start implementing the training that they're getting.
Okay, well, if there are no more questions, then that is about all the time that we have for questions. Thank you, Team Shark Tax. Very good job. Great work on your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, that is our last one. Thank